It was a freezing January evening, and the snow outside created a peaceful silence. Inside, the crackling fire projected a warm warmth across the walls of my living room. I had been living alone for the past 5 years after my marriage ended in grief. My husband's treachery created severe wounds, but I was able to restore my life. A life marked by independence and the satisfaction of raising my adoptive kid. James, my pride and delight, was now 26, married, and apparently established. His frequent visits infused warmth into the home. His presence always exuded warmth and vitality, but tonight seemed different. As soon as he walked through the door, his customary casual smile was replaced by a gravity I couldn't place. Sitting across from me, he appeared to carefully consider each word before speaking. Finally, he sighed deeply and ran his hand through his hair. "Mom," he said, his voice quivering slightly. "There is something I need to tell you." The firelight flickered in his eyes, reflecting his internal anguish. I leaned forwards, my chest constricting. "What is it, James?" I asked. He paused before the words poured out fresh and uncensored. "I can't stop thinking about you." He admitted, his voice wavering. "I tried, but I couldn't. It's not fair to Megan, and I know it's wrong, but I don't believe I've ever loved her like I do now." He drifted off, leaving his confession hanging heavy in the air. For a time, I felt paralyzed and unable to breathe as the room seemed to press in on me. The boundaries of our roles were destroyed in an instant. I stammered after struggling to respond. "James, this isn't correct. You are my son. I understand," he murmured, his voice breaking. "But I can't change my feelings." The fire crackled quietly, filling the silence that separated us. James sat with his head bowed and hands tightly gripped. His comments had upended the familiar pattern of our lives, leaving a heavy weight in their aftermath. The next morning, as the weak winter sun strained through thick clouds, a knock came at the door. I hesitantly opened it. My breath caught when I saw James on the porch. Snowflakes stuck to his dark hair and clothes. His eyes were gentler than the night before, yet the weight of unspoken words remained. "Can I come inside?" he inquired nervously, his voice low. I moved aside, unsure what to say. Of what, he had a tiny backpack over his shoulder, and as he walked in, I understood he wasn't simply visiting, he was staying. "James," I said tentatively, closing the door behind him. "What's happening?" He gently placed down his suitcase and turned to face me, his countenance opaque. "I just need some time," he said simply. "A few days to clear my mind. Megan is residing with her folks. I wasn't sure where else to go." My reaction was to say no, to send him back into his own life, but the vulnerability in his eyes stopped me. Despite my better judgment, I nodded. "Just a few days," I said confidently, despite my lack of belief. "Thank you," he muttered, his shoulders relaxing as if freed from a great burden. As the day progressed, I grew increasingly aware of James's presence. He had always been alert, but now his movements seemed deliberate. He insisted on doing domestic duties and urged me to rest while he cleaned the dishes. He brought in firewood, carefully placing the logs, and went to town to get groceries, returning with my favorite tea and chocolates. He avoided bringing up the previous night's chat, and for a while it was simple to pretend everything was normal. But it wasn't. His motions seemed intentional, as if he was attempting to show something, and the way he gazed at me, soft, searching, and steady, weakened my resolve. That evening we sat together in the living room. The fire produced flickering shadows over the walls. James had prepared dinner, a basic but robust stew, and served it to me first. Sitting across from me, his hands folded around his bowl, he broke the silence. "Thank you for allowing me to stay," he said. "I understand it's complicated." "It is," I confess, keeping my gaze downcast, "but I'd like to help you if I can. You've always helped me." He continued, his voice full of emotion. Even when I hadn't realized I needed it, I looked up, my heart missing a beat due to the intensity of his gaze. There was no sign of the youngster I'd reared. This was a man with his emotions raw and vulnerable. I hurriedly looked aside, feeling vulnerable under his penetrating glare. After supper, he suggested we watch a movie. Reluctantly, I agreed. We sat at opposite ends of the couch, the distance between us both soothing and awful. Despite my efforts to focus on the television, my thoughts deceived me, pulling me back to the events that had brought us here. The first time I saw something strange, it was subtle. A hug. Goodbye that lasted a bit too long. His hand brushed across mine more purposely than it should have. Then there were the glances which lasted just a minute too long, and the compliments felt more personal than casual. At the time, I dismissed it. We attributed it to our long-standing intimacy. But now, looking back, I'm wondering how I could have been so blind. When the movie was over, James turned to me. His look was soft yet unreadable. "Are you okay?" he inquired gently. "I am fine," I lied. My voice scarcely rose beyond a whisper. "Just exhausted." He nodded, his gaze fixed on me for a while before rising to retrieve the empty mugs from the coffee table. I saw him stroll toward the kitchen. His familiar presence filled the area in a way that disturbed me. That night, as I laid in bed, he consumed my thoughts. His silent attention, his goodness, everything felt different now, as if each motion sent an unspoken message. My thoughts raced with questions that I couldn't answer. When I eventually went asleep, I had the unsettling revelation that my emotions were no longer as uncomplicated as I had hoped. The next morning, James was already up, standing by the stove, with a mug of coffee in hand. When he spotted me, he smiled, and the warmth in his gaze made my chest tighten. "Good morning," he murmured softly. "Good morning," I responded hesitantly. "Breakfast is almost ready," he added, indicating to the skillet on the fire. I figured you could use a break. I sat at the kitchen table, watching him move, with an ease that was both natural and unsettling, as if it were his home, his life. In that moment, the weight of everything left unsaid weighed hard on me. He set a plate in front of me and sat across the table, his expression pleasant but searching. "You have been quiet," he replied after a moment. "Are you certain you're okay?" I paused, selecting my words carefully. "I've been thinking about everything," I explained carefully. He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "I agree." The stillness between us stretched laden with unspoken facts. I wanted to tell him to stop, leave, and return to the life he had made without me, but I could not, because in the quiet times in his kindness and steadfast attention, I began to experience it as well. I stood and headed to the window, pushing the curtain back to see the snow-covered yard. The moonlight reflected off the pristine white surface, providing a stark contrast to the turmoil in my head. "James," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know what you're saying?" He did not respond right away. When I turned around, his eyes met mine, filled with a grief I couldn't deny. "I've tried not to feel this way," he continued, his voice shaking as he leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. "But every time I see you, every time we communicate, I am drawn to you, and I don't know how to stop it." I slumped into the armchair near the fire, holding the armrests as if they could support me. I said firmly, "You're my son. I raised you, I adore you, but not in that way. I can't love you that way." He shook his head, exasperation and anguish visible on his face. "I get how it sounds. I know what others would think, but I can't keep pretending it's not present. It is ripping me apart. Mom." "James, stop," I interrupted, my tone becoming sharper. "You have a wife. You lead a life that does not contain this. You made vows to Megan. Do you realize what you're risking by saying this to me?" "I understand," he cried, his voice rising. "Don't you believe I know that I've been lying awake at night for months, trying to tell myself it's just a silly crush? There appears to be some uncertainty, but it is not." He rubbed his hands across his face, his misery evident. "It is not going away." I swallowed hard, attempting to calm the storm of emotions within me. I'd experienced heartbreak before, but this was a completely different kind of pain, one I couldn't begin to comprehend. I finally whispered nervously, "You need to leave. You should go home to Megan." He looked at me like I had hit him. "Leave just like that. You want me to pretend I didn't just spill my heart to you?" "Yes," I replied coldly, despite my inner turmoil. "Because there is no place for this in our life. You stated it yourself. It's wrong. It is not something we can change, discuss, or delight in. You need to leave." He rose slowly, the firelight casting shadows on his face. For a minute, he resembled the son I had reared, the child who would cling to me after nightmares. But suddenly, he was a man with emotions and desires that I couldn't reconcile with my place in his life. "I'll leave," he whispered gently, "but it doesn't end there. These feelings will not go away simply because you urge me to leave, and I doubt they will ever do." I closed my eyes as the door snapped shut behind him, his footsteps echoing over the wooden floor. My chest constricted and my mind raced. The days that followed blurred together as I immersed myself in work and errands, seeking to divert myself. But no matter how busy I was, James's remarks tormented me. I replayed our chat, analyzing every embrace, glance, and gesture that might have caused him to assume we shared more than just motherly affection. Late one night, the phone rang and I hesitated to answer. "Hello," I said. "It's me." James's voice came out as meek and tentative. I closed my eyes and leaned against the kitchen counter. "You should not be calling. I really needed to hear your voice." He said, "I apologize if this is selfish, but I can't help it." "James." I began, but my voice wavered. What can I say? How could I create limits with someone I had loved unreservedly for so long? "Mom." He whispered, his voice full of quiet desperation. "I understand you're trying to protect me, and perhaps yourself, but I can't go back to pretending. I can't go back to Megan and pretend everything's fine." When he mentioned his wife, guilt burned at me. "She loves you." I stated firmly, "She deserves more than this. She merits your loyalty. So what about me?" He inquired coldly. "Do I deserve to be unhappy for the rest of my life? To live a falsehood only to make life simpler for others? You deserve happiness," I murmured, my voice breaking. "But not like this. Not with me, James. This is not love. It's warped by our proximity and the conditions we're in. You must identify what is genuinely missing from your life and devise a solution to address it. You can't do that here with me." A long quiet ensued, and I worried if he had hung up. Then his voice came through barely above a whisper. "I apologize for putting this on you. I needed you to know. I needed you to understand. I understand." I murmured, tears flowing down my cheeks. "More than you realize. But James, this needs to end. It needs to stop." When the call ended, I stood in the dimly lit kitchen, holding the phone in my hand. The weight of our discourse pressed down on me as if I were bearing both of our worries. Outside, the snow fell silently and relentlessly, matching the tempest of feelings we couldn't shake. The days passed in a slow cadence with James, still by my side. We settled into a rhythm that felt natural and surprisingly reassuring. He was attentive in ways I was not used to, asking how I loved my tea, recommending novels I might appreciate, and keeping the place warm and pleasant. The tension between us gradually dissipated, giving way to something I couldn't quite identify. One evening after supper, we remained in the living room. The fire provided a warm, flickering glow, and James placed a blanket over my legs, arguing that the room was colder than normal. He sat at the far end of the couch, but as time went, the gap between us seemed to close. By the end of the movie, he was so near that his arm brushed across mine as he reached for the remote. "Sorry," he said, pulling back slightly. "That's okay," I said, but my beating heartbeat betrayed me. He turned to me, his expression attentive. "You know I miss this," he added. "What did I miss?" I asked hesitantly. He acknowledged to being here with you. "It feels right." I swallowed hard, not sure how to react. His remarks held a weight that I was not prepared to bear, so I dodged. "You've always had a way of making things seem easy." "Only because of you," he murmured quietly, his stare steadfast. "You make things better." I turned away, feeling the familiar tug of feelings I'd been attempting to repress. It was tougher now with him so close and continuous. "James, we've discussed this. I know," he said swiftly. "I am not trying to bring it up again. I want you to understand how much you mean to me. You mean the world to me as well." I confessed, my voice barely audible. "But we have to be cautious." He nodded and leaned back against the couch. "I am not going to push. I just needed to let you know." That night, as I laid in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about how natural it felt to have him around. His friendly presence and the ease with which we conversed. It was everything I didn't know I was lacking, and yet it terrified me. With each passing day, the boundaries I had set felt less important, and my feelings for James became more difficult to suppress. The following morning, a snowstorm arrived, turning the world outside into a peaceful expanse of white. By the time I arrived downstairs, James had already lit the fire, and the aroma of coffee filled the air. He looked up as I walked into the kitchen, a warm smile spreading across his face. He remarked, "Good morning," and handed me a steaming mug. "It's really awful out there. It appears like we are snowed in." I looked out the window where snow piled up against the glass. "Looks like it," I remarked, taking the mug from him. Thank goodness we had stocked up. He chuckled while leaning on the counter. "Maybe it's just you and me today." I nodded, attempting to ignore the flutter in my chest that his words generated. "Looks like it." The day passed slowly with snow obscuring the landscape outside. We played card games by the fire, told old stories, and laughed at stupid memories. We felt like we were in a bubble, isolated from everything else. By dusk, the storm had worsened, and the power flickered before going out completely. The generator turned on shortly later. "I'll grab the candles," James murmured, his voice firm in the sudden silence. He returned with a handful of candles, their soft glow spreading a soothing light throughout the room. The fire crackled and the space felt intimate, almost surreal. I sat on the couch and watched him set the candles on the table. When he turned to face me, there was something in his countenance that I couldn't identify. "You okay?" he inquired, sitting next to me. "I'm all right," I responded, my voice wavering. He reached for my hand, and his touch was warm and steady. "You don't need to be afraid. I am not terrified. I lied." "You are," he remarked kindly. "I can see it." I gazed down at our hands, his fingers intertwining with mine. "James, this isn't right." "Who decides what is correct?" He inquired, his tone, calm yet urgent. "What about the world? Other people or us?" I did not have an answer. All I knew was that the line I'd drawn was blurring, and the warmth of his hand against mine made it difficult to remember why the barrier existed in the first place. "I need time." I eventually spoke, my voice barely audible. He nodded and released my hand. "Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." That night, as the snow continued to fall, I stood outside his room. I had no idea what had led me there, except that something big had occurred between us. The door was slightly open, and I could see him sitting on the side of the bed, looking out the window. "James," I spoke quietly. He turned his eyes, meeting mine, a mix of surprise and affection in his expression. "Hey," he responded. I paused, my heart hammering. "I just wanted to check in on you. I'm okay," he murmured, moving closer. "But are you?" I shook my head, tears welling up. "I do not know. I'm not sure what to feel, or how to quit feeling it." He reached out his hand, lightly brushing across my cheek. Then he murmured gently, "Don't stop, just feel." I closed my eyes and leaned into his touch. For the first time, I allowed myself to face the truth. I did not want to push him away. I didn't want to fight what had developed between us. As his arms curled around me, holding me close, I felt a sense of calm that I hadn't had in years. The snowfall raged outside, but everything inside appeared peaceful, calm, and in order. The storm lasted for several days, transforming the planet into a frozen tundra. Inside the house became warmer and cozier, as if time had stopped. James and I proceeded through the days in a way that felt normal. Even though our unspoken sentiments were out of the ordinary, I attempted to tell myself that our intimacy was only fleeting and was caused by our seclusion. But deep inside, I knew better. Every chuckle we exchanged, every lingering glance, and every momentary touch pointed to something undeniable. One evening, when the fire burnt low, we sipped tea in the living room. I was snuggled up in the corner of the couch, a blanket wrapped around me, and James was stretching out close, his head resting against the back of the couch. The silence felt both pleasant and charged, like the stillness before a storm. "You've been quiet," he replied, his voice soft. "I'm just weary," I said. But that wasn't the whole truth. "Tired of me?" He mocked, his smile mischievous. I shook my head and smiled weakly. "Never." His smile faded, leaving behind an expression of quiet intent. "I've always respected your strength," he said. "Even after everything you've gone through, you've never let it break you, and a knot formed in my throat." "I have to be strong," I admitted softly, "for you and for myself." And now he inquired, his voice lowering. "Do you ever allow yourself to be simply you?" His question took me off guard. I averted my gaze as the weight of it pressed against me. I admitted, "I don't know how." He moved closer, his presence firm and grounded. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he explained. "Not with me." I looked to him, my heart breaking at the honesty in his gaze. "James, I'm not sure what to do with this." I murmured, my voice quivering. "I'm not sure how to make it go away." "Perhaps you don't have to." He added softly, "Maybe it isn't supposed to go away." I shook my head, tears streaming down. "It isn't supposed to be like this." "Why not?" He inquired, his voice calm but urgent. "Who chooses how things should be?" I opened my lips to respond, but had no words. My long-held rationality felt hollow in the face of his serene conviction. When he reached for my hand, his touch was warm and reassuring, drawing me back from the brink of my swirling thoughts. That night, as I laid in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. His voice was soft, and he gazed at me as if I were the only thing that mattered. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It scared me, but it also drew me in. When the storm passed, the world outside had changed, hidden under a layer of snow. The roads remained inaccessible, and the house continued to serve as our haven. James and I resumed our days together in a way that felt almost strange. Our relationship is growing in ways I never believed possible. One afternoon, as I stood by the window watching the snow melt in the mild sunlight, I felt him approach me. His presence felt familiar and soothing. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, his warmth flowing through me. "Isn't it beautiful?" He eventually spoke, his voice low. "It is?" I responded, my breath misting the window. He paused before speaking again. "You've always been my home, you understand. You have always been there for me, no matter where I have gone or what I have done." I turned to face him, my heart breaking over the vulnerability in his eyes. "James, I am not asking you to say anything." He interrupted abruptly. "I simply needed you to know. You don't have to feel the same way, but I need you to understand how much you matter to me." His words lingered heavy in the air. I examined his face, looking for something I couldn't identify. When I couldn't think of anything to say, I grabbed his hand and squeezed it strongly. Something changed in our relationship that evening as we sat by the fire. The barriers that had once appeared unbreakable now felt weak, almost non-existent. I didn't back away as he pushed in closer, his gaze fixed on mine. "I do not want to lose you," he whispered softly. His voice was filled with desperation. "You won't," I said softly, my voice shaking. "However, this is not simple. I don't mind if it's not easy," he replied, brushing his hand against mine. "I just care about you." His words shattered something within me. Before I could stop myself, I leaned closer and rested my forehead on his. We stayed there for a moment, the world slipping away until just the sound of our breathing remained. "I'm not sure where this is headed," I added, my voice barely audible. "But I can't pretend longer." He smiled then, a sweet, heartbreaking smile. "You do not have to." As he drew me into his arms and held me as if he'd never let go, a strange sense of calm came over me. Whatever this was or may become, it was ours.